Hi, everybody. Today on In Her Words, we're speaking to Dr. Yalda Uhls. Dr. Uhls was a studio executive who left Hollywood to pursue her PhD and study how media affects children. This conversation is fascinating in that she keeps things so positive and so forward thinking in what we're putting in media, how it affects our children, and honestly, how it affects us. We think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. You have such an interesting career and such an interesting pivot that you made a few years ago. So we'd love to kind of, start at the beginning, I guess, where how you were interested in becoming a studio executive, the entertainment industry, and then how you pivoted into where you currently are in your business.
I knew exactly what I was doing the entire time. Not.
You're the
um,
one.
I,
You're the one who
yeah,
knew.
exactly. Rule number one: follow your passions for sure. So I grew up in an academic family. Actually, my mom's a very, very famous breast cancer scientist, and I said I am not going into academia. I am running far away from that, and I ended up getting an MBA at UCLA. And I always loved movies. And when I got to UCLA, I was like, oh, there are people that create movies. They don't just magically appear, and there are people behind the scenes that do these things. And so I just followed that passion. I got obsessed, and I really didn't even know I wanted to be a studio executive. But like many young people, I was very young. Um, not I'm still young, and I really didn't know. I was like, oh, I want to be a creative executive. And I didn't really know what that meant. I think a lot of people think that's what they want to do, and there's lots of different paths. But for me, what I wanted to do was be creative, and I was lucky enough to, after getting the MBA, to get a job in this management training program at Sony. And I don't know, Doug Belgrad was in it, Amy Pascal was there, lots of famous women. Stephanie Elaine was my mentor.
Oh my God.
Um, yeah, great women. And then I just kept going up the ladder. I worked at New Line. My very first movie I got made, which was at New Line, was called Mi Familia, My Family. It's an intergenerational story of Mexican American immigrants. I am a daughter of Persian immigrants. I love the script. I fought for it. I got it made, and I ended up losing my job because I fought so hard. My boss did not like it until it was done. She hated the script. And it was a story about, that was a sort of a, not a mainstream, it wasn't really a New Line type movie. If you remember New Line. And
Mhm.
anyway, but I ended up then recovering from that. So that kind of that lesson was resilience. Like, you're not defined by the job. You are who you are. I then
Mhm.
got a job at a company called Live, but then that turned into Artisan, and now Lionsgate owns those titles, and that was an amazing job. So in that job, I got to supervise 10 movies over 3 years, and then I sort of recovered, became this sort of well-known person in the industry, and got a job as a senior VP at MGM. So that was my last job in the business. At that point, I was sort of done with being a studio executive. I wanted to have children. And I met my husband, who is a screenwriter, and we got married. I took a few years off, and then I decided to. I started becoming obsessed with children. And I started becoming obsessed with reading books on child development. And then I embraced where I came from,
I
this
was gonna say that
academic
academia
background.
wasn't gonna let go of you.
It did not let go of me. I was like, oh, these genetics. And I decided to get a PhD, and I got into UCLA, studying how media impacts young people. And I was obsessed with my children. It was 2009 when I got in. 2007, do you know what happened in 2007 in the tech world? The iPhone. So it really shifted, and that's where I was studying this stuff. So I was studying at a time when media was all of a sudden becoming something that young people were embracing. They always have, but now it was 24/7. And it was sort of a really good time to be studying this stuff. I was using my own children as something to sort of study and think about. Um, and so I did that and worked for a nonprofit called Common Sense Media. I was always very, very passionate about sharing research. So at that point, and what was interesting about the transition and the pivot was I thought, oh, I'm throwing away my Hollywood career. It's, I'm going into academia, I'm studying this, it's going to be useless. Guess what? It was so helpful. The training that I received in the industry to think about mass audiences, to learn how to produce things, the, very strong work ethic. All of these things applied to my new job, and my research got worldwide attention. I won a huge award for the research. I got, it was crazy. And part of that is, I think, and an editor told me this, is you're producing your research and you're designing your research and you have your ear, listening to like, what does the zeitgeist say? And I was studying that. So anyway, so I became a parenting expert. I wrote a parenting book. And through the process, I started realizing there's this amazing research out there that storytellers could use that I was very passionate about. And there was research on how to positively impact young people with storytelling, not just, oh, storytelling does this badly. There's too much sex, there's too much, racism, there's all these different things. It was sort of like, here's the ways you can positively impact young people. And that gave me the sort of idea to launch the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. We launched in 2019. And basically, we bridge the worlds of scholarly research, especially with child development, adolescent research, and storytelling. And we bring scholars and storytellers together. Susan Kartsonis has come to one of our meetings. Many people, Stephanie Elaine was at our first summit. Many of the people, I
Yeah.
knew started supporting me. And we've grown. So we're now, I now have 12 people. I bootstrapped when I launched, people really seem to love the concept.
Well, and
Very
it's
long answer.
so, no, it's amazing, and it. So when you were at the studios and working in the industry and producing, like you said, and looking at these different scripts that meant something, did this side of it pop into your head as a creator? Were you looking to say, how is this affecting children? Me Familia, which obviously is was such a successful. How is that? Did you
No,
wish there
I
was
really
research?
didn't, and if you know the industry, often kids programming, they've just laid off the entire group at Noggin, that's it's
Yeah.
often looked down upon.
Mhm.
And I was making adult programming, just stuff that I was passionate about, but I was always interested in diverse programming,
Mhm.
things that were a little bit character driven. There's no secret, Stephanie was my mentor. I love the work she did. I was always that I didn't really fit into the studio system. I was not interested in making comic book movies or superhero
Right,
movies.
right.
So I think it was all there, but I didn't really realize it till later on. So when I launched the center, my focus was mental health and
Mhm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to integrate that better into content. And that was always what I was interested in. And it's funny because when I went into academia, I said to my professor, oh, now I can really make impact with my work. I can wear this front and center. And she was like, you know what? You probably had more power to impact people's lives in the job you had as a studio exec.
Yeah.
So now I'm able to sort of work with storytellers. We don't create content, we work with
Right.
storytellers. We try to help them have the impact that they want, because there are many executives like I was, like Susan, who care
Mhm.
and who want to have positive impact. But our jobs are to get butts in seats, or people watching. And so we try to make it really, really easy for anyone creating content to create content that is meaningful and has a positive impact, and to convince their bosses to make that
Right.
content.
Right. No, it's and it's interesting because what you just touched upon is of your professor saying, you can reach more people with your old job. So when I was at ArcLight, one of the, the way that we did business and wanted to do business, that question came up for our CEO all the time. Like, how come you're not in academia? How come you're not in government, running for office? And when you're running a business like that, he said, we just at the ArcLight Hollywood location, we would see 15, 20,000 people a week.
Yeah,
And and those are, your films that we're talking about here. And so that impact that business can have on people is really something, that people don't think about. That, people walking through a grocery store, or walking through a movie
no,
theater, or
yeah,
walking through, a department store, there you're touching so many more people than you are in a classroom, or as a politician. So I think that it really does kind of flip it, that how you think about how you think about you're reaching people in a business that you're touching, and
it's
especially in
very true. I was
storytelling.
just at the White House, and there was an event that we were at a summit for young people at the Department of Education, and storytelling was threaded throughout, but it
Mhm.
was more about telling your personal story and using politics to tell a story. And in the panel I was on, I was just like, you should engage, just like the Obamas have, with pop culture and realize this can be an enormous tool to shape hearts and
Mhm.
minds. Um,
Mhm.
so I completely believe and understand. And there's research on this too. There is actually a lot of academic
Mhm.
research on how storytelling can have positive impact. And the LGBTQ plus same-sex marriage
Mhm.
movement really shifted culture, and representation
Mhm.
had a huge
Mhm.
influence on it.
Mhm. So with your organization, how are you guys, how are you trying to, how are you making yourselves available, to filmmakers, to storytellers? At the summit, we've been lucky enough to have, organizations like GLAD, and different organizations, Hispanic Storytellers Organization, and Americans with Disability Organization, and they're all so approachable and so generous with their time. And they're like, we're not here to scold anybody, we're here to help. We want to help from script level, and we want to help tell an authentic story. We don't want to, we don't want to grade you, we don't want to scold you after the fact.
Yes.
So how does your organization work to, like, to do that, to get in front of people with the
Yeah.
data and with
Yeah.
the information?
Well, that was always my theory. Like, we motivate with the carrot, not the stick. Because I had been in storytelling for 15 years before I got into academia, I felt like I would be more successful at speaking the language that would resonate with storytellers with research, and it also engaging them. And that's what we found. We work with YouTube, we work with CAA, we work with Google, we work with Activision now. We're on their
Mm-hmm.
inclusion council. We're getting gaming. We work with Disney, Warner's. We're with we work with everybody, and we create really easy to read tip sheets. We have a tip sheet around boys and men and how to shift the way we represent them so we can support women. I mean, honestly, there's women in entertainment, but we also need to shift the way that men are represented in, at least on screen, not the power structures behind the screen, because women definitely. And we did a study on first time directors that Lionsgate paid for, that really showed that it's challenging for women to get those opportunities. Um, but we need to think about representation of boys and men. We did a tip sheet, and that, like, people love it. Like, Bill Rubel, who is an executive producer on Ted Lasso, wrote on Modern Family, says that after he saw our tip sheet, when he goes into pitches, he talks about men being vulnerable and showing vulnerability because he realized this was important. So we have, 10 to 15 tip sheets. We're focused on adolescents, 10 to 25, although we have a for-profit arm as well that does preschool content, and the project we did with Stars, and we did a project with Lionsgate. Both of those were with for adult content around diversity. So, but we do research. We did a study called that got us a lot of attention, authentically inclusive representation. We created this metric. CAA and Nielsen came on board and worked with us on developing this later on after we did our first study. We found that large budget movies that score higher on AIR, that's what we call it, make $32 million more at the box office opening weekend. And then we repeated that, found it again with a much larger sample. And we've just done it again, and we're trying to figure out if we can do it with television. So we try to also demonstrate, doing good and doing well. You can do both. We have convenings as well. We have think tanks. That's what Susan came to, where we put scholars, storytellers, activists, and adolescents in a room, and we try to think about things we can create that might move the needle in different topics. And that's how we got that report, the AIR report and the boys tip sheet. Because then we manage the ideas that come out of the events, and we create products for storytellers. We do workshops where we actually do field building. We go out and we talk to creators. We get hired to do these and around different topics. And because I was in the storytelling business, but I also understand research, we make it engaging. We don't make it preachy. We make it, applied. And they've been incredibly successful. And then we also have a youth group. So I'll tell you one story, if you don't mind. I don't know if you heard about our Teens and Screen study. It came out last year. So Teens and Screen. So we did our second version of it. We surveyed 1,500 teens from across the country about what they want to see in content. And this is all free on our site. You can go to our site. All these tip sheets, all our research is free. We're trying to also give people who want to create more, like the Lionsgate First Time Directors Report, which is some really great business reasons or that sort of question biases against first-time directors. These are tools we hope people will take into their meetings and say, no, you're wrong when they say first-time directors are risky. Oh, no, women are really discriminated against when they want to be a first-time director. Here's some data. So this Teens and Screens thing, we have a youth group, and they do research in their communities. We teach them to do research around topics they care about, because I don't think Hollywood gets adolescents right. We tell stories about adolescents based on our own recollections or on our children. And that is not a representative sample of today's modern adolescents. So they did this research. They found in this small sample that the kids they were talking to were really sick of the way sex and romantic relationships are portrayed in content. So we were like, oh, that's interesting. Why don't we see if a nationwide sample would say that as well? So we did this nationwide sample of 1,500 teens. We found overwhelmingly that the majority of teens were tired of the heteronormative relationships, tired of seeing sex. They wanted to see more platonic relationships. They wanted to see 40% wanted asexual relationships portrayed. We released that study. It got worldwide attention. It was picked up crazily. Jimmy Kimmel had it on Jimmy Kimmel. Somebody just told me it was on a podcast that so many people, 32 countries reported on it. And I was on NPR on Larry Mantle talking about it. And the head of Lionsgate heard me and asked his head of inclusion to bring me in. They asked us to bring teens to the meeting so we could talk about teens and screens and what teens want. And I said, will you pay us so that we can pay the teens? And they said, okay. So we brought teens into the room in front of Lionsgate. We talked about the teens and screens. So the research we did, and we've done this with Amazon now. We're doing it with Disney. We're doing a little roadshow with it. But the great news was these teens were talking directly to everybody in that room and sharing what they think about the content targeted to teens, and they were getting paid for it. So these are some of the things that we do. We do these original research and stuff like that.
Can I ask how you choose your sample sizes when you're doing your studies? How do you evaluate your sample sizes?
So there's a whole statistical method. If you really want to be scientific about it, there's a power analysis where you try to get enough people that you'll get significance. You'll be able to and do you really want me to get this academic? I can
No,
get in the weeds
I'm
if you
curious
want.
just because like when you're starting to look at like when you're doing like teens and screens and you're looking at children and you're thinking, and when you're starting to look at what your sample sizes are and who you're putting in a room, obviously if they're making decisions on behalf of, you know, some of these studios and informing those studios, I think it's important for our audience to understand how you actually pick those 1,500 students that are going into the room that are going to be defining that content as it moves forward.
Yeah, so 1,500 people weren't in the room. There were only a few in the room, but
Or yeah,
it
but
was a
yeah.
nationwide survey. So we work with, there are things called survey panelists, and you pay
Yeah.
people. So we work with a company that recruits teens. They recruited, and we asked for 100 teens at each age point from 10 to 24. So 100 at 10, 100 at 11, 100 at 12. We asked for it to be balanced as closely as possible to the census for race, gender, and also for geographic location. And all
Okay.
that data is in the study. It's free on our site, and you can see it's pretty close. It's
Yeah.
not exact because to get it weighted exactly to the census costs a lot more money.
Okay.
So it's a pretty representative sample.
Okay. Got it.
Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah.
With the studios being interested in Lionsgate being interested in Stars, and like you said, all of the different studios, how are you involved in the process then, if any further down the line, as are they when they're talking about, you know, what content they're making, how they're making changes, do they bring how are you guys involved then?
Sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't. We just worked on, we worked for a year advising a showrunner on a TV show called Spiderwick
Mm-hmm.
that's based on best-selling books, and
Mm-hmm.
Paramount TV produced it, and Roku is releasing it. And we advised the showrunner on mental health themes, and we brought in a clinical psychologist and a member of Gen Z. So we really had a nice sort of group giving notes just on the mental health content. We are not, we stick to our lane, because even though I know how to give notes on scripts from a studio executive perspective, there are so many cooks in that, we don't want to get in the way of that. So we gave notes on first drafts, outlines, and the actual first cuts. And Roku's releasing it, and we're doing a panel with the showrunner to talk about the mental health themes. And it is not a show about mental health; it's a fantasy show. It's a lot like Stranger Days. I mean, it's very and it's targeted to tweens and they're selling it as 4-quadrant, and it can be 4-quadrant. So that is sort of a soup to nuts project that we did. We still think we could be doing more once something's released. We have a whole mental health research line of research as well that's informing what we're doing. But we, that's a heavy lift. Like that's
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah, it's a
And
lot to stay with
there
it.
are so many great people. We don't think of ourselves like we'll recommend GLAD, or we'll work with CAPE, or we'll
Yeah.
work with different organizations and say they have the bandwidth and the deep gritty knowledge. We have the social science research. I understand how media impacts young people, adolescent development, but I'll bring in someone who's really, really deep into that, or hand it off to someone who can give it the time. I mean, we're kind of interested in scale. So, and we're interested in thought leadership. So we try to also give our ideas and throw them out there. And we do an annual summit as well. We had our third one there in October. And we then hope other people will take them up. The boys tip sheet, for example, I just was at PBS yesterday, and they have this really cute show called Tiny Time Travel. And it's 2 boys who are friends, and they have a friend that's a girl, and they're kind of cool, and they're talking about social intelligence. And I'm pretty sure the creator, he came to several one of our events and told me he loved the boys tip sheet. And somebody told me that they used it in pitches. So I'm
Nice.
pretty sure he might have been inspired. I just emailed them like, can we say you were inspired by us? But we just hope the ideas take hold, and we do get notice that they do, and we're trying to track it more, but that's, a lot of work, a lot of tracking. Metrics are hard. But we do have examples. We these workshops. Tim Federle, who did high school musical series, told us that he really learned a lot from one of our workshops, and he applied what we taught into season 2. But we just did the sort of broad level thought leadership, sort of let us give you some information, and then we hope that they'll go out and do the work, or we'll connect them to someone to do the work.
Right. And you've mentioned like feature film and television series. Are you seeing the evolution from when you started to now, where it's podcasts and influencers and YouTube? How do you kind of infiltrate those platforms where, I mean, and again, that there's a ton of kids
So
obviously,
important.
and
And
maybe are
gaming
watching and listening.
is
Gaming,
huge.
you mentioned, yeah. So how
Yeah.
do you
So we
move from
just,
that kind of
yeah.
those traditional platforms to the new platforms?
Well, that was actually my research, because I had started in 2009. So I actually, studied how social media and digital media impacts young people. And I had a pretty good reputation in that field. So I keep my foot in the social media field, especially from a parenting perspective, because I did a lot of parenting talks. Um, we work with YouTube. I'm on the YouTube Kids and Family Council. I've been on it for 5-6 years. So I really understand what they're doing, and they're working really hard to make sure they're, doing what they can to keep the algorithm, recommending safe and high quality content for young people. Meta came to our summit, and we've been trying with TikTok, and Activision, as I said, and now Microsoft's part of it, and Blizzard is very involved. We do a lot with them. It's all bandwidth. We've grown. So I bootstrapped. I started with me not paying myself, and now I have 12 people. In 2 weeks, I have a young gamer joining us, 23. Part of the reason I hired him was because he's a gamer, right? And I was like, you know what? There's plenty of influencers in gaming, and we don't have that expertise, and I would like that expertise. So I really listen to young people. I really try to, integrate their voice as much as possible, because that's what we're focused on. So I want to make sure that they know so much more about their digital world than I do. And what we really believe, so this is something I'd love more in the industry to pick up on. This Roku thing is actually the first time we've been able to create some sort of conversation off the screen about the content that is important and could positively impact young people on the screen. We did a study on 13 Reasons Why, and we found that it's the 3rd season, so it wasn't the 1st or 2nd season when the very controversial content came out. But we found that in that season, 92% of the teens that watched it talked about mental health afterwards. And they sought information online, and 88% talked to someone. Half of them were parents. So we believe a teen is going to watch one of these shows. It has mental health themes. It's going to engage them. They're going to be interested. Then they're going to want to go talk about it. If they don't have the right place to talk about it, or they're going to look online for information, they can go down a rabbit hole of misinformation. Let's create content around it where you can have conversation information that's accurate. You can connect them to organizations like NAMI or Mental Health America. So we've been really pushing that to have these second pieces of content. So anyway, this Roku thing is our first time where we're going to do this panel. We're going to film it and try to create some content around it, digital content around it, so that if a teen is watching a show with mental health themes, they're also interacting maybe with an influencer, or, maybe there's a game, or, we're just really trying to be original and think about, we're in 2024, like, end cards, PSAs, they're so over it. Adolescents don't, Gen Z does not care about that stuff, and we did further research. They would prefer to see a young person their age or a little bit older talking about these issues than a celebrity. We rely so much on celebrities. It's more effective to have someone they relate to. So anyway, we're just trying to be really creative and think through and not follow the old patterns. But the hard part about that, as you know, is you're trying to reinvent things, and it's really hard to get people to pay attention. But it's working slowly but surely.
No, the data is fascinating. And I'm curious. I know one of the things that when I was watching an interview with you and looking at some things was you, I loved your statement of we want to lead with facts, not fear. And, and I
Here,
think as a parent, that's so important. And kind of
here's
what
my
you're
book.
saying. Yeah.
Media
Yeah.
Moms and
It's
Digital Dads, a fact, not
facts, not
fear.
fear. Well, and because I know for me as a mom, my youngest was born in 2007 as well. And there gets a point where you almost shut down because it's like, I cannot hear
Yes,
one more horrible thing about social media.
exactly.
I cannot listen to, and so, but I did hear the study on platonic relationships and wanting to see that. And there's that point where you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense because the kids, they go out in groups. They don't really date. They love to go. So, like what
Yeah,
we're seeing in our real life
yeah.
is reinforcing that data that we're hearing. But you do get to that point where it's like, I can't be scared straight anymore. It's just
It's not working. Look where we are. It's gloom and
right.
doom in this poor generation of young
Yeah.
people, 24/7 in their faces. The news is so negative. It's not working. And actually, at the White House, there was a piece of data where they looked at framing, and they looked at framing young people as vulnerable. We have to
Uh,
protect them. We have to,
right.
find they're really, young. We have to take care of them. Or framing it as like, look at how exciting they are. They're out there. They want to conquer the world. Let's give them some power. And
Yeah.
the bar graph, like if you framed it as a positive thing, about 30% of people wanted to support more people, wanted to support policies to support young people. The other one, you're just like you
Yeah.
shut down.
Yeah, I asked my kids, and I asked my daughter who's 16 and my boys who are a little older, and I was like, please tell me your school is not like Euphoria and that none of you went to,
Yeah.
and they were like, and the boys who were out of high school, they were like, no. And my daughter's like, I hope there's no place like Euphoria that, but it is, it's that, so I love what you guys are doing with that facts, not fear kind of leading with that. It feels like people are going to pay attention. We're open to it because we know so many. I mean, I know so many amazing kids and amazing positive,
Right.
and they are looking for those outlets. And I love that I was just all of the people that you were mentioning that are partnering with us on the summit and have in the past, Stars and Lionsgate and Roku and
Yeah.
Paramount, and
Yeah.
that they're leaning into this data is so exciting.
Yes, I mean, we have a lot more work to do, it's, yeah, and we're very inclusive too. So we're part of the Full Story Initiative, which is an initiative that CAA has put together, a lot of advocacy groups, and we're part of Storyline Partners.
Mhm.
And our theory is with all of these is like, there's so much work to do. There's room for everyone. Like, I mean, some
Fantastic.
people are sort of like, oh, it's a zero sum game, and we've got to be the only person to solve these problems. And we kind of feel we need every hand on deck, because so our AIR report, the authentically inclusive representation report, it looks also at storytelling. So it's not just who's in front of the camera and who's behind the camera, but it's also about the way the story's told. And like we have so much work there, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I've gotten better on some metrics with bringing more women, in front of the camera for sure, and behind the camera better, and people of color. Um, but we still have so much to do in sort of thinking about the way we tell the story. And it's funny, when we consulted on Spiderwick, anything we consult on, I'm like, really? Are we going to really be able to help them think about how they're portraying what they're portraying? We end up with like 5 pages of notes on there's actually, because that's not the storyteller's job. The
Yeah, yeah,
storyteller's job is, first of all, so hard. They have so much to think about, and their job is to get people to want to get engaged and love this content. So outsource the thinking about how the content is impacting,
Right.
the young person. Get people who want to work with you and support you and understand your process and are going to give you tools to make it easy. And there are a lot of great organizations like the ones you mentioned who can do that.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. Well, Yelda, thank you so much for being with us. I can't believe how fast the time's gone. But one thing I do want to ask as we're wrapping up, what do you enjoy watching? I mean, I can't imagine you have much downtime, but do you have, books, podcasts, movies, shows that are your guilty pleasure or kind of escape that you like to watch?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, on the plane back, I watched You Hurt My Feelings, right?
Oh,
The
with
Nicole.
Julie Louis-Dreyfus?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good
I thought
one.
that was so fascinating.
Yeah,
I mean, holdovers. I've obviously watched every Oscar thing.
yeah.
I loved Wednesday, even though our teens had some issues with the relationships there. I mean, I watch everything. I mean, I enjoyed Euphoria. I had the same reaction. I'm like, this does not look like anything I've ever seen.
Please, yeah,
But I
exactly.
enjoyed it. I love Succession, White Lotus, everything. You know, it's funny, my parents only let me watch the academics, 1 hour of TV a week. My entire career has been, how can I make media
No,
part of my life?
right. No, it's funny. And movie people, I was, an ArcLight for years and AMC before that. And I was like, no, I'm a movie person. People are like, how do you see so many movies? I'm like, I don't know.
I know.
It's just what I do because
What
when
have
you're,
you seen that you love?
I loved Holdovers. I loved
Yes.
it. I really did. American Fiction is one of my
Yes, loved
favorites
it.
that's out right now or out for award season. I love that. I'm trying to. I love true crime podcasts and that, and I'm trying to venture into a wider variety of podcasts. So trying to do that. I'm watching Death and Other Details right
Oh,
now
I'll have to
on
look that
Hulu.
up.
It's a good mystery one. Loved Succession, same. Loved all of the last kind of group of Emmy Award winners. Loved those. So no, there's a
I'll
lot
tell you
of.
my guilty pleasures. I watch way too many cult shows.
Oh
And
really?
yes, cults and for a while serial killers.
Yeah.
and
Oh,
and
me
my
too.
theory is there's social comparison, and that's a psychological construct, and there's upward social comparison
Uh,
and downward social comparison. Downward social comparison is where you're like, oh, I'm in a better place than that person, and so it makes you feel better. So I'm like, that's it, at least I'm not in a cult.
oh my God, that is hilarious. So I watch all of those, and now I'm gonna feel good about myself. It's a social experiment.
It's helping you sort of, yeah, exactly, take care of yourself.
That's funny. Well, Yelda, thank you so much for joining us. It's so good to see you again. I really want to
Thank
be in
you.
touch. We'd love to
Yes, I
to
would love
have
to.
you come back.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womenandentertainment.com.